So Jenny just confirmed that people are seeing my slides now.
Yeah, I see it.
Good, good. So I just want to do a quick introduction, and then Helen and I will do a dialogue in terms of some of the tough questions. So welcome to COVID-19, Tough Decisions for Business Owners. Today is episode 17, Mental Wellness, How to Reduce Risk in the Workplace. And my guest today is Helen Patterson of Life Works Well. We started this series 9 weeks ago now. It's kind of amazing that we've been in Ontario in an emergency situation for coming on to 9 to 10 weeks. The webinar series was a need to answer, from our perspective, something to help managers and business owners. So much change was happening, so much uncertainty. And with our knowledge as HR experts and serial business owners, our team decided it was something that we needed to do and address. So we were offering bi-weekly webinars to help you with those tough decisions you're making. We're providing tips and strategies to help you with these difficult decisions that you need to make. If you're social media savvy, then do tag us at PeopleBright or at hashtag COVID-19 TDBO. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to ask Helen to talk a little bit about herself. So I'm the founder and president of PeopleBright Consulting. We're a full-service HR consulting firm, and we really are passionate about helping people create healthy workplaces. My husband and I actually had a company previous to this, and hence the serial entrepreneur in me. We co-founded iTrans Consulting, and that was an engineering firm. We grew it from 2 people to 125 people in 7 offices across Canada. We created what we thought would be a special place to work, different from the usual engineering firms. We wanted our employees to feel challenged in the work that they did, so that they were progressing in their careers. We also wanted to create a work environment that was really a positive work culture. And we thought we had achieved that. So we actually put our names forward to the best workplaces in Canada. And we were really pleased that we were top 10 twice. From that, since I sold the business, I created a concept called Connect with Rev Up, which is how we became successful in creating positive energy. And I do management and training programs from that. So I have 25 plus years of experience in human resources. I've been an entrepreneur 4 times over now. And my background includes healthcare, engineering, working with professional services firms, being in the IT industry, and working with not-for-profits. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm going to ask Helen to talk a little bit about herself.
Oh, thank you so much, Hilda. It's really interesting hearing you speak, because I know that one of the reasons we connected was we have very much a similar passion in creating healthy workplaces. So I'm Helen Patterson, and I'm the founder of Life Works Well, and I help scaling businesses create high performance and heart-centered cultures that drive revenue growth. I've been in the HR field and an employment lawyer for over 20 years as well. I really do have a passion for people. I have been involved in a number of first initiatives in go-to-market over my career. I'm also the author of 2 HR publications with Thomson Reuters, Employment Policies That Work and Best Practice Terminations. So I've done quite a bit in my career, from employment law, HR, to wearing business hats. And I feel like right now has been one of the most challenging time for those in the HR profession. And I'm really glad that you've been doing these series as well as some others, and I've been doing some mentor circles as well, because it is probably, you know, I would say up there with one of the most difficult times that employers and employees are facing right now. So I think it's also a great opportunity to open up that dialogue further on mental health. So thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Helen, because we do have a lot in common. And I think it's good to hear different perspectives about the same topic. And I think both of us are passionate about work culture, and we're passionate about mental health. So that's, I think everybody's in for a good, healthy discussion amongst ourselves, and hopefully some of you will feel comfortable sharing. So I'm going to introduce a few facts and statistics and signs and symptoms of burnout, and then ask Helen and I to come forward, and we're going to have a dialogue on some of the topics that we want to cover this today. So depression is going to be the #2 leading illness in 2020, and that is identified by the Mood Society of Canada. That's an alarming statistic, but that is what is expected. And when we see what's happening across the globe, we're seeing that happen. Wuhan and China are now undergoing a lot of mental health issues. We are not going to be immune to that, and that's why we felt we needed to share that today. So some interesting statistics I want to bring to you is that #2 cause of depression and who's affected. They say 42% of Ontario adults have increased their substance and gambling use since the pandemic. This is a sign, a symptom of, trying to manage the anxiety that people are going. And it is prevalent. In any given year, 1 in 5 people, Canadians, experience mental health or addiction problems. And you have that surge of, let's talk, more mental health awareness. Well, with COVID-19, we are going to feel that even more. 67% feel that the mental health impacts of COVID-19 are going to be serious and lasting. Now, these statistics are based on a survey that's done by CMHA. This is the first of their surveys, and there's some very interesting statistics. So above, you'll see a link to that particular statistics. The cost to society, 90% fear that the pandemic will have a detrimental effect on the economy. The World Health Organization noted that depression and anxiety have estimated cost to be $1 trillion in lost productivity. This is a cost that we need to help, both as human resources professionals and as business owners. We really should spend dollars in the upcoming year, 2 years, to help reduce mental illness so that it will be less serious. So here are some signs of burnout, and these are things, triggers that you should be looking for in your staff and in yourself. Having low energy or little interest in what you're doing. People might start to be tardy or absent. They might forget things that they do in the workplace, and they might have a negative attitude, or their behaviors might result in bursts of comments that seem untoward or really disrupt the working relationships of people. And then physiological changes, people saying they have headaches, they're tired all the time, their backaches. The physical symptoms is often a reflection of the underlying mental conditions. So these are things that you need to be looking out for in yourself, in your staff, and even in your family. I know myself, I'm very alert to what's going on in my family and to see if they need help. So I wanted to have Helen and I talk about several topics today. And so we're going to just show you this now. We have our own speaking notes, and then I want Helen and I to come forward and have a dialogue. But the things we want to talk about today then are, first of all, we want to talk about what are some of the concerns with people working remotely during the pandemic. But then flip it for a bit to talk about what are some of the positive and future concepts for working remotely. Then we'll go to what are some of the concerns for businesses where staff are physically returning to work, and some tips and strategies. So I want to stop sharing right now, and I want to go back to our main screen so that Helen and I can have a dialogue. So Helen, do you want to start first and talk about what you feel are some of those concerns that people might have working remotely during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you said at the beginning, Hilda, that this has been already a 9-week, coming up to 10-week journey that we've been having. And I think that, you know, the one thing when I was listening to you speak was up and down came to mind, because I think that everyone has likely experienced many of those symptoms at some point during this process. And I think what I would say for leaders, first of all, is self-awareness is really important, because if we don't have that recognition for ourselves, but also being able to see the signs of others and be tapped into that, then that's going to be a challenge. So I think that one of the most important things I think we're seeing is, and we talked about this a little bit before when we were planning this, is that people need to keep in mind that we're all individuals and each circumstance is going to be a little bit different. So we talked a little bit about, for example, some, you know, maybe some that are just starting out their career, who actually may be working downtown or sharing space with some young colleagues and they can't find space, or they're going into their bedroom to hop on a Zoom call because there's no, you know, ability to have privacy. So many of those issues, I don't think there's a realization that it's stressful. Like even right now, sorry, was trying to find a quiet space today because, you know, my hubby has taken over the home office and, you know, he's on board meetings. He's on like full day calls. It's challenging. And so, you know, we've tried to come up with ideas on how to alleviate it. But, you know, I'm worried, okay, someone's going to be flushing the toilet in the background, the dog's going to be barking. And if you don't know how to kind of just let that go, it's going to create a little bit of anxiety sometimes. So I think that's part of it. So there's been a lot of help on how to work from home successfully, and also to, as leaders, to have some empathy towards that. That's really going to help. Those are just like typical things, right? Then there's all the caregiving issues, right, that have come up, and with, you know, trying to homeschool and trying to find space for them, and the kids not having their daily activities. You know, they will also, like, it is hitting every generation, really. You know, a little bit about elder care too. You know, I wanted to highlight that because I'm actually personally going through some worry about my mom, who's in one of the homes, and, you know, they now have cases. And so, you know, I have to be really grounded and breathe and do my meditations to help me get through that, so that I'm not freaking out, so to speak, right? So I think these are all just real issues and challenges that we need to be open and talk about. There's so many, right, aspects.
Yeah, and I think you hit that really, you shared that really clearly, because I think on one end you have people who are parents with school-age children, or elders, or even teenagers, and on the other end you have younger people who are single and who may be living in a 30-story apartment by themselves, and to go out and get a slice of bread or groceries is a big thing, because you have to go up and down those. So I think as business owners, as HR decision makers, we need to remember each one of us is unique, and each one of us has a different journey with different stories, who may or may not have lost loved ones. And then there's the financial aspect. There is uncertainty about how much money have we got coming in. And I really love the message the government has tried to do, is that they talk about safety first, which is important, particularly as we start opening up the non-essential services now. And whether that's a new set of anxiety, then we've got families. They want us to focus for families. And so this remote working has come to be. And then third is about finances. They don't want us to worry. So they've introduced stuff like the CERB, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month. And the beauty of that, they've just extended it now to August, so it gives us peace of mind. They've reduced the criteria now for business owners. If you hadn't heard that news, is that instead of $20,000 salary, there's criteria like you just have to have operating expenses and you pay this or that. So do go and check that, because that's brand new news that's exciting. So there is so much anxiety, and all of that is creating stress, and as you say, up and down. Any other thoughts before we go on to the next question?
Yeah, I think, you and I both know this, but often some organizations might forget if they have health and benefits plans. I think you had a guest on last week on that, and the utilization of employee assistance programs, or employee family and assistance programs, as they're sometimes called. They've been underutilized a lot already.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the first thing I did with clients was, encourage the leaders. You're the one that sends it out. Remind people those resources are there. And, they may not always, there's been some issues, I think, about whether or not they're the best. And there's so many good services out there. So people don't know what they don't know. So what can you share with them to provide some resources for them to help with this? Because this is it's going to continue. Now we're talking already about return to work, and there's the challenges with that we'll get to a little bit later. And we just basically are starting to get used to working from home. And now you're saying go back to work. So I think those resources, and I know we're going to share some at the end, but one company I know actually introduced meditation. They didn't have it before, and I thought this is great, because there are some free services, but there's also some companies like Headspace or Calm that were offering like deals for large groups. And really, it's a great, I love this. From the positive, which we'll talk about later, is that there's some of this support coming up finally, and like maybe we'll see some utilization of it, right?
I think that's a great segue into the benefits and the positiveness of starting remote work. And I think the funny thing is that prior to COVID-19, people would say, no, we're not doing remote work. People will not be productive. This just won't work. And I think it was IBM, and I might be wrong, but it was a huge company who issued a statement like, say 3 weeks before COVID-19, saying, we have reviewed remote working from home. We decided that this is not for our company. Of course, when COVID-19 came, all of a sudden everybody started to do it. And I almost think of it as a forced pilot project that everybody has to try remote work and see how that works. So what do you see, Helen, as some of those positive things and things we need to think about the future of what remote work could be and might look like?
Yeah, I think that's the one theme that I've been talking a little bit about, and this is applicable here, is there's been an escalation, right? So, we were hearing about the future of work, all the predictions, and basically that has happened. It's no longer the future, like we are here right now in the future. And so some of these things that we were talking about, which is embracing more work from home or remote work, has come to fruition right now. And I think it's interesting, because I think it might have been Yahoo and a couple of the other larger companies that they had remote work. And remember, they brought everybody back in, and there was uproar because they felt that you needed to come back into the office in order to be innovative and to be able to brainstorm. And I think that what was coming out of that was, it was a lack of trust in some cases. So yeah. I think this is going to really be positive for those workplaces that can allow for remote work. I've had quite a few clients, employees talking about how much more productive they are. They're not dealing with these long commutes. Some people commute to work sometimes 2-3 hours a day. And if you can, have a 10-minute commute to your little office or your kitchen table, I think that that is a plus. So opening that up for consideration and seeing that it can work is going to be really helpful. And think about the cost savings from an organizational perspective. you can, like real estate and rent is like huge, right? So I think we might see more co-sharing space or other ways to have this. And if you can do it in this most difficult of times with kids at home or with having to deal with all of that, I think that's a definite plus for sure. I think another thing is the openness, and we've touched on this a little bit. Communication had to be a lot more transparent and open, and having this capability of technology. So technology was the other future of work issue, like the driver of change, right? So, I've always said it can be a blessing, but it can also be, you need to get off it if you're like scrolling on social all day long or something. So you do need to have some processes and protocols around that. But technology as an enabling tool is really going to be beneficial as well. I think I can give an example again of one client who, when I first came in, I was recommending, because they had offices in Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver. And it felt like it was a little bit siloed culture-wise. And it's like, why don't you get some kind of video capability? It'd be really, really helpful. You could also use it for your members. And we were exploring that. And then obviously, and they had already had meetings with Zoom and a couple others. And it's like, okay, we're turning it on. And it was great because it really has brought those 3 offices together to be able to be on meetings, to see each other. So I think that those are the 2 like main things, I think, or 2 or 3 that come to mind.
Just to add what you were saying, my husband and I, when we had our company, we had embraced video conferencing, and this is back in the early 2000s. We had, by that point, I think we had 4 or 5 offices across Canada, and we said we do not want to create silos, and we even had terminology there. Everybody was an office, not a branch office and not a head office, but it was the Richmond Hill office or the Vancouver office. And one of the things we did was we purchased video conferencing, and the company was actually Duocom, and they were the first company that did a lot of creative stuff. So they had Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola in their company. And when they did monthly statistics, our company was on top in terms of the amount of video conferencing we did. And that really helped us make sure that we were a team together. And so I really do think that we should embrace technology. When we first started off with COVID and people were learning how to use Zoom meetings, I think the difference I noticed between those who are in business and have been using Zoom meetings and meeting clients from a virtual office perspective, what I loved about the early days of remote working was this sense of more casual business relations. We knew people were working at home, and there might be 5 people, as in my case, there's 5 people in this home, 4 of which are working remotely. And the thing with that is that you knew that people would bump into each other. You'd see people walking behind you. And sometimes you'd see the odd child, come up, and normally people would say, shoo their child away. But in COVID days, we were able to let them come forward and even give dad a hug. And it just made the environment seem more human, more friendly. So I think that was one of the benefits that I saw as well. I think the quality of work life for families and the decreased commute time is definitely a benefit.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because I think one thing that I've been passionate about my entire career has been work-life integration.
Yeah.
And people talk about work-life balance, but I worked with a woman years ago when I first started my business, and her company was Work-Life Harmony. And that I thought was just a great way to explain, like, really what we're looking for is that peace and fluidity between work and life. And because really work is a part of life. Mm-hmm. And so bringing that human element into the workplace, which is what we want to do, this is the business we're in. Yeah. And for leaders to embrace it has been one of the really, I love it. Like, I'm in meetings and, the VP of marketing, his little guy will come and sit on his lap, and I'm like, this is great. And you're still getting work done.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry about being polished all the time. Like I've seen our CEO wear a baseball cap. I've worn one sometimes I dress up, but I think that's part of actually when we talk about strategies like for health and wellness and mental health, you should try to feel good. We'll talk about those signs later that, it is important to still not let go completely, but we're still at least more accepting of that. Like I've had, my little doggie, which she's sleeping right now on the couch, which is nice, but normally she's barking her head off at something outside or whatever. And that is the one thing that I've really, really enjoyed, to see how the realness has come.
There's a sense of humanness to it now. So I want to keep us going because we want to make sure we have time for people's questions. The next one is really the fact that non-essential services now can begin to resume in a staged fashion, regardless of what province you're from. Everybody's in different stages. So this is creating a new set of anxieties, because I was listening to somebody the other day and they said, this is normally when you have a crisis, events happen and you take care of them and then you move forward. We're still in this crisis because we don't know that returning back to work isn't because COVID is over. We're now at a stage where we think we've kind of got those numbers going in a downwards trend. Let's bring people back. But people can still get COVID. Those numbers can start to rise again. So we're asking people to come back to work with this uncertainty and with this crisis not over yet, right? People feel that it'll be over when we have a vaccine and people can resume a newer life, but resume more what we had before. So I only want to spend maybe 3 minutes on this topic, but what are some of those thoughts, Helen?
I think you're absolutely right. This is the ongoing up and down I was talking about, because I know for a fact by speaking with people that there's fear. There is anxiety about going back to work. If you think about it, what are the protocols? What are the health and safety first, like you said? How do I know it's safe? I have a compromised immune system. I'm worried more, like, am I going to be accommodated? What about childcare? I don't have childcare. My kids can't be in school. They can't be in camps. They can't be in daycare. So how am I supposed to manage? So there's still a lot of those real anxiety stresses that are going to come up. And I think preparation for that is going to be really, really important. I may have had a little bit of internet issue there. Sorry, that's the other thing. It's like the challenge of working from home. Sometimes it's coming in and out. But I think preparation for this, and we mentioned World Health Organization. Every province has public health. The governments are providing guidance and resources. Like you need to make sure as an employer you're following those. And communication, right? One of the things that is always, communication's always been a challenge. I think you talked about that on another one of your series, and the way of communicating not only what the protocols are going to be, the steps, but having an open dialogue to address some of those concerns and fears, and transparency. And again, it goes back to the discussion we had earlier, is everybody's situation might be different. So that's where you can't just say, hey, this looks good. I'm going to just download this protocol and that's all I'm going to do. What's your workplace like? Can you still support work from home? Do you have to, there's so many things, like think about even office space. A lot of them are open environments now. There's not, there's some closed office space if it's for confidentiality or privacy, but a lot have moved to open. So, do you have to reconfigure furniture? What about getting in all at the kitchen? Are you going to still be distancing within the office? Those are all real questions. And, some people are already still working. So some companies are still working. So they've already had to implement that.
Yeah.
So I think it's almost like, what are all those things I need to think about rather than just rush right in, right?
And that's what the government said, is that these are the dates, but open when ready. And what they mean is make sure you know what you're supposed to be doing, because the risk to having, you know, exposed your staff and they get COVID, or a client gets COVID, and if they can trace it back to you, you can bet that some lawyer is going to help some person who got COVID to put your company financially at risk through litigation. So, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
worst case scenario. So there is a lot of anxiety going around. And I think, Helen, you've already alluded to some of the resources. And I think I want to switch us back to the screen, to sharing my screen and talking a little bit more about it. Do so. I just want to keep sharing. We had talked about some of the tips and strategies, and they're here. I want to actually, if there's any other tips and strategies, Helen, share them. I put the screen up for people's benefit, but I want to also open it up for questions. So start putting questions in the chat line. I'll give Helen just a minute to share some of additional resources that we haven't already put together. This will be a summary slide of things that you need to think about. But Helen, go ahead and share.
And I know that we've covered, we talked a little bit about this prior, and there's a lot of great information. I know you shared this usually with the participants after. And I guess I just will go back to, again, the empathy in the middle, right? It's, you have to have had, first of all, know your people. Hopefully know a little bit about them. What is their family situation? What is their, what are their challenges right now? I want to share a quick story. There was one situation where one of our clients' employees actually lost a mother-in-law in one of the homes here. And so, you need to be thinking foremost about what are the supports and resources, and how do we want to respond to those situations, because that is like, people are uncomfortable, as you know, they're uncomfortable sometimes with dealing with those challenging dialogue, right? But also, looking at your policies and programs and adapting them, and communicating, over communicating, I think is, you can't communicate enough, right? People, the unknown is frightening. So the more you can give clarity in what you mentioned here, effective communications, one-on-one, but in groups, like I recommend, and this should have been happening already, which is regular town halls, if you want to call them, or regular all team meetings, rather than hearing, bits and pieces, like really from the top. What are we doing? It's all the aspects of the finance, the return to work. How are we going to deal with it in different offices? Where can you go for resources and supports you need, right? And create that environment of trust and openness and transparency, so people won't be afraid to really say what's on their mind, because I think many feel they hold back. So I really think we covered a lot here.
Yeah, I know. And I totally agree with you. I think it's really important at this very, very difficult and stressful time that you really get to know your employees, your co-workers, because the more we feel we can trust and feel we're in an open, honest environment, the more people will allay their fears. And when you are stressed, you cannot focus. You cannot do the work you need to. So if you can do anything for people, is give them that feeling of calmness and an ability for them to then focus. Everything is taken care of. People care about me as individuals. And I think one of the interesting things is difficult conversations. Too many people avoid difficult conversations, and difficult conversations can be both positive and negative. And they can be where somebody comes to your office and all of a sudden tells you something like, you know, I've just lost our mother-in-law due to COVID. So then what do you say, right? So learn how to have these awkward, difficult conversations. There's the pre-planned ones where you're going to talk to somebody about their behavior. And one of the things that I do is help people with difficult conversations. I did a training session or a webinar on that last week, and I'm actually going to be doing a training session on it because I think that's one of the valuable things that we can do for people. Do we have any questions right now, Jenny, or does anybody want to come forward, unmute themselves and share? Because we learn from each other, and certainly you've heard Helen and I share with you some of the things that you need to be considering, but I think there's a wealth of knowledge amongst us right now.
No questions on the chat yet. Feel free to unmute yourself, everyone, and just have an active discussion with Helen and Hilda.
Well, I'm just going to carry forward with this summary slide because I think we've really touched on these points. If you want to take away, this is where Helen and I feel that you need to invest in the health and success of your company. And really that is by investing in the health of your staff. No time than now is when we do it. And people say, well, I can't afford that. You can't not afford this, because if you have people that are so stressed they can't focus, that affects their productivity. If you have people who are worried about their loved ones and they feel that they're worried by themselves and they can't share that with you, it's going to, you know, affect productivity. And right now we don't have a lot of extra things to trim because it's hard to find business. So whatever businesses get, they have to be there for their clients. They have to get that work done, and that means part of having the right people doing work in a meaningful way where they're feeling good and healthy and able to carry forward. Thoughts, Helen, on that?
Yeah,
as well?
you know, I think that in the best of times, it's important, like the healthy habits that individuals encourage that if you can. You know, even simple things like saying, hey, don't forget to take a walk and have your water, and all those things that we take for granted sometimes are, you can send reminders. And I think the only thing I meant to mention, which just came up when I was listening to you, is appreciation and recognition go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's often overlooked. Like, we're so busy, heads down. Like, people, we have to remember that burnout was already a huge topic before this happened, right? So there has been, you know, people, you know, that's when we hear about it, we hear about it like, oh, until it's too late. So having proactive strategies to, you know, create that ability to have supports, you know, even tips, like, it's not fluff, right? It's really, really important. You can't do work if you're not healthy. And then also just appreciating and recognizing, like, especially companies that have had to just, like, they are hugely financially impacted. And so how are you as leaders and organizations supporting employees that have that fear of job loss if they haven't already been laid off, right? So I think it's just bringing back this into work and having an understanding that these are the types of things that your people are concerned about, you know? So anyway, I think it's been, sorry.
Any question? I was going to ask if there was any questions. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to carry on with a couple more slides. So we talked about some resources. So we have put them here with links to various places where you can get resources. If you want to assess yourself in terms of your stress levels, the CAMH has several tools that you can do to check yourself, and I did test them myself beforehand. I felt that I was in a low level of stress, and these at least validated my perception of what I do. But I think every day, and Helen get into it, neither did I, but every day I try to think positively. And when there are things that are very negative, I turn them off, because that can be so draining. And I only look at what the government is doing from a factual point of view. I don't want to go into the negative stories, because I find that very draining. So do find what works for you to keep your stress levels down and keep them in check and balance. Because if you get overly stressed, you know yourself, you probably won't be able to focus, and you won't be able to think about what you need to do to make sure that things are going well. And you need to stay healthy for your family, for yourself, and for your company and the people that you work for.
But I just want to chime in on that too. I
Sure.
think it's quite important for people to be creative in these times, just to see what you and your team wants to do. And you never know, someone in your team member might be a karate member, right? I read somewhere that they actually had a weekend team gathering where that team member hosted a karate session for that team, right? And so it is important for everyone to be creative and to kind of utilize everyone's skills outside work to help each other work through these difficult times.
And that's so true, is that you don't have to come up with all the ideas, whether you're HR or business owner or managers. Gather people and get their input, because anytime you have people that come together with a variety of different backgrounds and interests, you will have more creative ideas on moving forward. So always include people in the plans you're making, and make sure you communicate that effectively. When people feel they belong, they're part of the company, they become more engaged, and that increases productivity.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I wanted to share that at PeopleBright, we certainly can help you. We do offer a free 30-minute strategy call with me, and there's a link here to Calendly. And I'm going to let Helen share her support that she can offer.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much. Yes, the same thing. I do offer a free 1-hour consultation, and really, even if there's just questions that you may have about your return to work, or layoffs or restructuring, unfortunately that might happen. Happy to hop on a call at any time, and I really have appreciated this discussion today.
Well, I really appreciate having you. I think both of us really care about people, and that's why we're in the human resources business, but we really do want to help. So do take us up. That word free does mean free, because we are people who want to help. I love what you say here: when you put people first, you better serve your customers, community, and the world. So I really wanted to share that if people didn't read that, because I think that's important. That's who you are, and that's who we are as people, and that's why we bring these webinars and have guests like yourself coming.
Yeah.
We have been doing this for 8 weeks going on. This is our 9th week. And here are some of the topics that we've actually presented on: managing HR decisions, mastering difficult conversations, being ready to open your business, both from a people perspective and from the actual safety side of it, and then group benefits, costs, cash controls, how to survive financially. We had Stuart Rudner come on as HR legal. So these all are on our YouTube station. We send those to you as part of your signing up today. But if you want to see, are interested in any of these, please do go and link that in. Are there any other questions, Jenny?
No.
Okay.
Julie said, thank you, ladies. She'll be in touch for specific questions.
Okay, so we do have our upcoming one, so that you know, is one on how to manage performance remotely, and then how to build strong work cultures remotely, because I think this is the way of the future, and people should be thinking about what they need. If they don't have policies now, they need to start thinking about those. They need to think about how to manage performance, good, like the motivating kind, and not so good, the ones where you do have concerns. So I would like to thank you all, and if there are no further questions, then have a safe week, and I hope to catch you next week on my topic.
Thank you so much, Hilda. That was great. And everybody, don't forget to breathe.
Yes. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and I hope you found it really beneficial to hear that perspective and really to think and focus on your mental health, the mental health of your family, and the mental health of your coworkers, your employees, whichever relation. But we are all going to need our big hugs physically later on, if not emotionally right now. Take it easy. Stay safe, everybody.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.